Hi, I'm Nancy, a 27-year-old new mother. I'm trying to navigate the beautiful yet challenging world of motherhood. The first few days at home with my newborn son felt like a whirlwind of bliss and exhaustion. Even though he brought immense joy into our lives, the physical recovery from childbirth was harder than I had expected. The house was always in disarray, laundry piled up, and dishes rarely made it out of the sink. One afternoon, as I was trying to calm my crying son, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was Kathleen, my mother-in-law, who had come by without any prior notice. Her eyes quickly scanned the cluttered living room before settling on me with a mixture of concern and disapproval. "I thought I'd come and see how you're managing, dear," Kathleen said, stepping over a stray baby toy. "Jason mentioned you might need some help." "Thanks, Kathleen. Things are a bit hectic, but we're managing," I replied, trying to mask the stress in my voice. Kathleen walked into the kitchen, where the clatter of unwashed dishes was audible. "It looks like you could use more than a little help," she remarked sharply. "This place is a mess. Is this how you plan to raise my grandson?" Her words hit me hard, and I felt the weight of her judgment crushing my already fragile spirit. "I'm doing the best I can," I said defensively, holding my son a little tighter. Kathleen sighed heavily. "Nancy, being a mother is about prioritizing, and right now it seems like you're not prioritizing anything." I was about to respond when Jason walked in. Seeing the tension, he quickly tried to diffuse the situation. "Mom, Nancy is doing an amazing job. It's been tough with the baby not sleeping well," Jason said, trying to defend me. Instead of backing down, Kathleen turned to Jason. "You need to help her understand what's at stake. It's not just about keeping the house clean, it's about responsibility. She's not living up to the family standards." Jason looked at me, then back at his mother, clearly torn. "Mom, please, let's not do this now. Sophie is recovering, and—" "But that's exactly when you need to instill discipline," Kathleen interrupted, her voice rising. "If she learns it now, she'll manage better in the future. You can't be soft on her." "Maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe Sophie needs to learn the hard way," Jason said, his words feeling strange and uncomfortable as they left his mouth. "Exactly." Kathleen nodded, pushing Jason gently but firmly toward me. "Show her that this behavior won't be tolerated." Before I could react, Jason's hand struck my cheek. The sound echoed through the room, a stark and horrifying marker of the line that had been crossed. I held our son close, his cries blending with the rapid beating of my heart. "Jason, what are you doing?" I managed to say, through tears. The pain from the slap was less than the betrayal I felt. "This is for your own good, Nancy," Kathleen said. "You need to learn." Jason's voice was hollow, and he couldn't meet my eyes. The room fell silent, except for the soft whimpers of my son. Jason glanced at me apologetically, his face a mix of frustration and embarrassment. Kathleen stood firm, her expression unreadable but her stance uncompromising. What was supposed to be a supportive visit had turned into a harsh critique of my parenting and my worth. As Kathleen prepared to leave, she whispered something to Jason at the door. I couldn't catch all of it, but her insinuating tone and Jason's troubled lip told me it wasn't words of support. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. What was supposed to be a supportive family environment felt more like a tribunal, and I was on trial. As I tended to my son and my stinging cheek, clarity about my next steps began to form amidst the chaos. I needed a plan, a way out, not just for my safety, but for the well-being of my little boy. The house that once felt like home now felt like a trap set by the very people who were supposed to love and protect us. The night after Jason slapped me under Kathleen's manipulative guidance, I couldn't bear to sleep next to him with my baby in my arms. I retreated to the nursery, a room that had been a sanctuary of sorts these past few weeks. As I rocked my son back to sleep, the events of the day replayed in my mind, each replay sharpening the pain and betrayal. The next morning, while Jason was at work and Kathleen presumably in her own domain, I made the call. Louise answered on the second ring. "Louise, it's me. I need that help you offered," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Say no more, Nancy. I'll come by today with my truck. We can store your things at my place until you figure out where you want to go. Louise responded, her voice firm and reassuring. The plan was simple but risky. I would pack as much as I could during the day, focusing on essentials for my son and me. Louise would help me move everything to her place in the evening. We decided it was best to leave before Jason came home from work. I knew that if I faced him, he might sway me with apologies, or worse, Kathleen's influence might prevail again. Throughout the day, as I packed every outfit and every baby toy, each item felt heavy with memories and what-ifs. But the echo of Jason's slap and the look in Kathleen's eyes were all the reminders I needed that staying was not an option. By late afternoon, most of our things were boxed up and hidden in the garage. Louise arrived just as the sun began to set. Her presence felt like a beacon of hope on what had been one of the darkest days of my life. "Ready?" she asked as she walked in, taking in the scene of my life reduced to boxes and bags. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, holding my son a little tighter. We worked quickly, loading the truck with the precision and speed of a well-oiled machine. The nursery, my sanctuary, was the last room I cleared. I took a moment there, saying a silent goodbye to the life I had hoped to build with Jason. As we drove away from the house, I watched it disappear in the rear-view mirror, a chapter closing with a heavy but hopeful heart. My baby slept quietly in his seat, unaware of the change, but finally safe. This was the first night of our new life, one where fear and manipulation would no longer hold sway. Safe at Louise's place, my resolve only grew stronger. The peace and support I found there contrasted sharply with the oppressive atmosphere of my own home. It was here in this sanctuary that I began to meticulously plan how to expose Jason and Kathleen for their true colors. The goal wasn't just to escape, but to ensure they couldn't twist the narrative to their advantage or hurt anyone else. I started by reaching out to family and friends under the guise of catching up. During these conversations, I subtly recorded any mentions of Kathleen's behavior or Jason's unusual submission to her. Some were wary, but many were unaware of the depths of manipulation and control Kathleen wielded. Over the weeks, these bits of evidence began to form a clearer picture. I compiled text messages, voicemails, and recorded calls. I even managed to capture a particularly damning video of Kathleen coaching Jason on how to handle me, using language that made it clear this was more about control than concern. With everything in place, I chose the venue for the confrontation, a family gathering hosted by Jason's sister for her anniversary. It was a neutral place with enough family members present, some of whom had quietly expressed discomfort with Kathleen's dominance in the family dynamics. On the day of the gathering, my nerves were as taut as a wire. I arrived with Louise, who had agreed to support me through this ordeal. The murmurs of greeting were tepid. The tension surrounding Jason and Kathleen's recent domestic issues had even reached the most distant relatives. After the initial pleasantries, I stood up, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I have something important to share with all of you today," I began. Every eye in the room locked onto me. "It's about Jason and his mother Kathleen, and how their actions have not only impacted me and my son, but the entire family." Jason, looking shocked and a bit scared, tried to interrupt. "Nancy, let's not do this here." But I pressed on, pulling out my phone. "This is not just a domestic issue," I said, connecting my phone to the Bluetooth speaker. The room fell silent as the recordings began to play. Kathleen's harsh directives and Jason's hesitant agreements to correct my behavior were met with reactions ranging from shock to disgust. Jason's aunt, who had always been fond of me, looked particularly betrayed. "Is this true, Kathleen? Were you forcing Jason to do these things?" she demanded. Kathleen's face was a mask of fury and panic as she tried to deflect. "These are just taken out of context," she stammered. But Jason's cousin, who had been a quiet observer until now, stood up and said, "No, they aren't. We've seen hints of this for years. We just never wanted to believe it." The confrontation turned the tide. Relatives began sharing their own observations and experiences, slowly painting the portrait of a woman who had manipulated her family under the guise of matriarchal concern. Jason sat there, pale and silent, finally seeing the web his mother had woven around him. As the family meeting turned into a heated debate about Kathleen's influence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, not just for me to see, but for everyone. The storm of the family confrontation left a quiet, somber realization for everyone involved. Jason's family, long under Kathleen's sway, now saw her manipulations for what they truly were. The collective shock was palpable, the discomfort undeniable, as they came to terms with how deeply Kathleen's influence had burrowed into their lives. For me, the decision to leave Jason was as painful as it was necessary. As the family gathering dispersed, the finality of my choice settled in. I gathered my son, who remained blissfully unaware of the turmoil around him, and with one last look at the family home, I stepped into the unknown. Jason watched us leave, a mixture of sorrow and resignation in his eyes. His voice, once so familiar, now seemed like a distant echo as he whispered a feeble goodbye. Kathleen, on the other hand, faced a harsher reality. The family she had controlled so tightly now turned their backs on her. Each member grappled with their own feelings of betrayal and misplaced trust. The blame for breaking the family apart was placed firmly at her feet. Her attempts to regain control fell on deaf ears. The evidence and collective testimonies at the gathering had been too damning. In the weeks that followed, Jason tried to reach out with messages full of apologies, pleas for understanding, and promises of change. But the memory of his hand raised against me and the echo of his mother's voice in his actions were barriers too great to overcome. The trust was shattered, and with it, the foundation of our marriage. I found refuge in a small apartment far from the neighborhood. I had once called that place home, a place where my story was a secret to everyone around me. Now, Louise remained my steadfast supporter, guiding me through this new chapter of my life. My days were consumed by the simple routines of caring for my son and creating a world that was free from the shadows of the past. Healing was a slow and often painful process. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened felt overwhelming. Yet, the freedom to make choices without the fear of manipulation or abuse was a powerful motivator. I began attending therapy and joined support groups for single mothers. Gradually, the fragments of my old self began to come together, forming someone stronger and more resilient. My son's laughter became my anchor, and his milestones were like guiding lights, pushing me forward. As he grew, so did my confidence in our future. Months turned into a year. One evening, as I tucked my son into bed in our cozy living room, filled with drawings and toys, I reflected on our journey. The pain of the past was still there, but it was overshadowed by the light of new beginnings. The support of friends and the unconditional love of my son had created a safety net strong enough to catch me on the days I faltered. Sitting down with a cup of tea, I finally felt ready to share my story. I started a blog, a space where I could talk about my experiences and connect with others who might be facing their own battles with manipulation and abuse. Each post was a step further away from the victim I had been and closer to the advocate I was becoming. As my story of resilience and courage comes to a close, I want to ask you all a thought-provoking question. Do you believe it's possible to fully break free from manipulative family dynamics, or do the shadows of such relationships linger in our lives forever? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments.